an obligation on the Minister for Education when they are doing capitation for schools to ensure then that they factor the need to purchase special instructional materials to cater for the needs of children with difficulties in hearing. The Speaker, I fully support this bill, and as I conclude, the Speaker, the provisions of Clause 18, which I had made reference to. In fact, what the promoters of this bill are saying is that as much as is practically possible, then everybody who goes to school, they need to be trained in the Kenyan Sign Language. That is aspirational, but it's a good step. It's a place to begin. So that, in fact, going into the future, then the Kenyan Sign Language, because it is called Kenyan, which means it is uniquely Kenyan, then the Kenyan Sign Language becomes the third national or official language in this country. So, Mr. Speaker, then that way, we don't need special interpreters of messaging on radio, on TV, in public rallies. That if I go to Kakamega to address a rally, I can very easily just tap any person that has gone to a school and tell them, come here and translate for the people, because everybody then will have attained sufficient competencies for Kenyan Sign Language. If this Kenyan Sign Language, then it's our language, the Speaker, and I believe it is, then we must show it by example. We must begin to teach it in schools. It must begin to become an examinable subject in our schools. The Speaker, with those many remarks, I support the bill.
Senator Chirenge. Maybe before, Senator, you proceed,
okay.
Allow me to make this communication. I would like to acknowledge the presence in the Speaker's gallery this afternoon, a visiting delegation from the County Assembly of Kajiado. The delegation comprises of 3 officers from the Office of the Speaker who are on a benchmarking visit with their counterparts in the Senate. Now, honorable senators, on behalf of the Senate and on my own behalf, I extend a warm welcome and I wish them a fruitful visit. I will allow Senator Tobiko under 1 minute to say a word of welcome.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, let me thank you for this opportunity. Let me take the chance to welcome the delegation from the Kajiado County Assembly to the Senate of the Republic of Kenya. Mr. Speaker, this team is on a, working mission and learning mission at the Senate. I'm sure their time here will be well spent. It will be of value to the Assembly of Kajiado and to the great people of the County of Kajiado. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Chirenge, kindly proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. And from the onset, I want also to join you to welcome a number of guests. I've seen today the senators, a lot of guests, from students to visiting delegations. Mr. Speaker, I want from the onset to congratulate Senator Professor Margaret Kamar, Deputy Speaker Emeritus, for bringing this bill, the Kenya Sign Language Bill 2023. Mr. Speaker, I was asking myself, is it possible to have what we call the special needs bill, so that we put everybody, the deaf, the blind, the mute, so that we don't need to do per legislation, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, This bill has come at a good time. I think we are having conversation and being cognizant of our people with special needs in our society. I want just to join my colleagues in supporting this bill and saying this is timely. So, Speaker, the issue of sign language or the deaf, Mr. Speaker, is something that the Constitution gave an attention. Article 210, not Article 210, the Constitution 2010, Mr. Speaker, as enumerated as languages of the Republic of Kenya, should include English, Kiswahili, and also the sign language. So I think we are rightfully in place. I think this is just elaboration of, Mr. Speaker, of recognition of this special group of individuals within our communities and within our nation, Mr. Speaker. So, Speaker, Article 44 and Article 54 on PWDs, Mr. Speaker, recognizes that the government has a role. And I want to request Senator Professor Margaret Kamar that we need audits as per Article 54(5), where it says the state shall ensure the progressive implementation of the principle that at least 5% of the members of the public in elective and appointive bodies are persons with disabilities. So, Speaker, I think it is the right time as a Senate, and I don't know how we will initiate that, where we have progressive reports, because we are passing a lot of legislation. We are requesting, Mr. Speaker, compliance, Mr. Speaker. We are requesting a lot of attention, but there is no one, Mr. Speaker, that can tell us today in county governments in Kenya, this is the number of PWDs that have been elected or appointed across the country. I think for us in the Senate and Parliament, these are issues that we are grappling with, even the county assemblies. But on the appointive aspect, because Mr. Speaker, appointive is easy. You know, we can argue with you about elective, because if you're having 6 constituencies in Nandi, which one should belong to PWDs? Do you force people to elect PWDs to achieve the threshold? But the easiest way, Mr. Speaker, is to only engage on the counties. Let us do an audit. We've complied at national and county governments, Mr. Speaker. And I think that is, I've seen Senator Kamara has been a great champion of PWDs, or Kenyans who live differently, ably. So, Speaker, I want to confirm to the House that I'm not one of the PWDs, Mr. Speaker. So anyone who is watching or seeing me should not imagine I'm just a temporary PWD, and I hope your office should facilitate my temporary status until I fully recover, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, and therefore Article 54 this is the life that is being breathed into Article 54, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, even I want to bring another point. I know my colleagues have talked about devolving the training of people with special needs. I'm proposing, Mr. Speaker, the national government should give tax-free to all assisting devices, so that our people, Mr. Speaker, the hearing aid, the seeing, any process, even the things that are being used by deaf schools in this country, Mr. Speaker, they should be given tax-free. I know there is situation of Inua, sorry, I almost say Inua Mama. Mr. Speaker, Inua Jamii. There was, before those days, there was what we call Inua Mama, but we didn't know where they were ignoring Mama too. But, Mr. Speaker, it was about the Inua Jamii, and they are registering. Mr. Speaker, the PWDs and the people above 70, I think that's what the Ministry of Interior or the ministry concerned is doing. So the question should be, when we are doing this registration, there are people, Mr. Speaker, who are also severely impaired, or PWDs that are severely impaired, Mr. Speaker. But when we are registering now, no one is very keen to capture them, these people living that is. And you see, Mr. Speaker, where I come from, the PWDs in my county, for example, Nandi, have complained. And counties are not taking them seriously. For example, in my county, what they do yearly, and you know this is budgeted, they call them to Kapsabet showground. They give them soda, mkate, or a loaf of bread, blankets, and mattresses, and that is the end. That is how low some of the counties think about PWDs. And unfortunately, my county is leading on having a low view of how our PWDs should be treated in this republic, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, I want to laud Senator Kamara. I think this is the right we're having this conversation. And therefore, on the tax-free, Mr. Speaker, I was told the cochlear implant that my brother, Senator Boni Khalwale was talking about, we need to give them tax-free. The devices, hearing aid, Mr. Speaker, reading glasses, any other form, the walking sticks, I know, Mr. Speaker, there are many organizations who are doing it as part of charity. But we must ensure that there is tax-free to any assistive devices to most of our young men and women, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, even public places, access, we must agree, Mr. Speaker, and also the funding of these schools. I know ministry is doing